There's a comforting myth Americans like to believe about cybercrime. We imagine a kid in a hoodie, sitting in a dark basement, pounding on a keyboard, hacking banks for fun. A lone wolf. A genius. Someone law enforcement just hasn't caught yet. That mental image is outdated. And dangerously wrong. What we're dealing with now isn't hacking as rebellion or technical brilliance. It's industrialized crime. Structured. Scaled. Professionalized. Cybercrime today looks less like a criminal subculture and more like Amazon, Uber, and McDonald's had a very illegal baby. And the numbers should make you uncomfortable. Global cybercrime now costs the world over $15 trillion per year, and at current growth rates it's projected to exceed $20 trillion by 2026, a figure that would place it behind only the US and China as the world's largest economy. That's not a side problem. That's a parallel global system. Cybercrime didn't suddenly explode because criminals got smarter. It exploded because crime became modular. Instead of needing one highly skilled hacker to do everything, break in, write malware, negotiate ransom, launder money, those functions were broken apart and sold separately. Just like modern corporations. Today, if you want to run a cyber extortion scheme, you don't need to know how to code. You can rent ransomware software, outsource phishing campaigns, buy stolen identities, hire money mules, launder funds through crypto, and negotiate ransoms via call center-style operators. All of it is available as a service, often with dashboards, tech support, performance tracking, and revenue splits. This isn't theory. It's documented reality. Investigations into ransomware gangs show HR departments, internal fines, productivity quotas, even employee of the month bonuses inside criminal organizations. That's not chaos. That's management. Let's talk about ransomware, because it's the clearest example of how far this has gone. Modern ransomware groups don't attack companies directly. They build platforms. Think of it like this: the ransomware developer is the franchisor. Affiliates are franchise owners. The developer supplies malware, infrastructure, leak websites, negotiation tools, and payment systems. Affiliates pick targets, deploy attacks, and when the ransom is paid, the money is split. Typically, affiliates keep 70 to 80%, while the platform operator takes the rest. One single ransomware operation has been linked to over 2,000 victims across 120 countries, extracting more than $100 million in ransom payments, while accounting for nearly 40% of all ransomware attacks globally. Read that again. One brand. One platform. Almost half the global market. That's not hacking. That's market dominance. Here's where many people get confused. Every few months, headlines announce a big takedown: server seized, affiliates arrested, websites shut down. And yet, attacks keep rising. Why? Because the platform survives even if the people don't. Ransomware gangs metastasize. When one group becomes too visible, it fractures. Affiliates migrate to smaller brands, malware gets reused, infrastructure gets mirrored, and new names appear using old tools. It's like cutting off one head of a hydra and being shocked when two grow back. Law enforcement is fighting organizations that behave less like gangs and more like resilient software ecosystems. And that's only one side of the problem. The darkest evolution of cybercrime isn't technical. It's human. In Southeast Asia, particularly in parts of Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, cybercrime has merged with human trafficking. Scam operations now run out of fortified compounds. Thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands, of people are trafficked, detained, beaten, and forced to run scams targeting victims overseas. These aren't pop-up operations. They rely on payment processors, crypto exchanges, messaging platforms, identity marketplaces, and laundering networks. One investigation uncovered a single marketplace facilitating $28 billion in illicit transactions, dwarfing the combined volume of early darknet markets like Silk Road and Alphabet. Again, scale matters. Let's be blunt. Americans are targeted not because they're uniquely careless, but because they are wealthy, digitally integrated, legally constrained in retaliation, and emotionally vulnerable in predictable ways. Healthcare data. Tax refunds. delivery notices, romance scams, investment promises. Fraud already accounts for over 40% of all recorded crime, and when cyber-enabled fraud is included, it pushes past 50% in some jurisdictions. Cybercrime doesn't replace traditional crime. It absorbs it. The biggest mistake societies make is treating cybercrime as a technical problem. It's not. It's an economic system, complete with labor, logistics, finance, and governance gaps. As long as jurisdictions don't align, safe havens exist, payment rails remain exploitable, data remains overcollected and undersecured. Cybercrime will keep expanding, not because criminals are winning, but because the system rewards them. And that brings us to the hardest question of all: what happens when cybercrime stops being an external threat and becomes structurally embedded in the global economy? Every time a major ransomware group gets taken down, officials hold press conferences. Servers seized. Websites defaced. Affiliates arrested. It looks decisive. It feels reassuring. But structurally, it barely moves the needle. Why? Because modern cybercrime doesn't rely on one organization. It relies on fungible components. Malware gets reused. Affiliates migrate. Infrastructure is mirrored. Branding changes, tactics don't. When one group falls, others absorb its talent and tools. Sometimes the same people reappear under a different name within weeks. In leaked internal chats from ransomware syndicates, you can see something revealing: high employee turnover. People come and go constantly, but the platform survives. That's not a gang problem. That's a platform resilience problem. Governments love telling companies, don't pay ransoms. Morally, that's easy advice. Operationally, it's much harder. If you're a hospital whose systems are locked. If you're an insurer with millions of medical records exposed. If you're a logistics company with operations frozen. You're not deciding between good and evil. You're deciding between paying once, or bleeding daily, legally, reputationally, operationally. And here's the dirty secret: many companies that pay never publicly disclose it. Why? Because disclosure creates lawsuits, regulatory scrutiny, and shareholder panic. So ransoms get paid quietly, reinforcing the business model. Some governments have floated making ransom payments illegal. On paper, that sounds strong. In practice, it risks pushing negotiations further underground, while still leaving victims to deal with the damage alone. This is what economists call a coordination failure. Everyone would be better off if no one paid. But any individual victim is worse off if they don't. One of the most damning revelations in recent breach investigations isn't how hackers broke in. It's how much unnecessary data companies were holding. Names, addresses, medical histories, identity numbers, kept for years, sometimes decades, long after their operational value expired. In one major healthcare breach, forensic experts noted that even basic encryption or data de-identification could have rendered stolen data useless. Instead, it was stored in readable form. We built an economy where data collection is rewarded. Data minimization is ignored. Data security is treated as a cost center. That's not negligence. That's incentive design. Cybercriminals didn't create this vulnerability. They simply monetized it. Crypto didn't create cybercrime, but it supercharged it. Cybercrime existed long before cryptocurrency. But crypto solved three massive problems for criminals: cross-border payments without banks, pseudonymity at scale, automated laundering via decentralized systems. Investigations into scam ecosystems show money flowing from victims to mules, through payment platforms, into crypto, across jurisdictions, and out again, often within hours. In some cases, criminal networks even created their own crypto exchanges to bypass regulation. This isn't a loophole. It's an alternative financial rail. And once you have that, enforcement becomes exponentially harder. Here's where things get really uncomfortable. Many cybercriminals operate from jurisdictions where extradition is unlikely. Law enforcement cooperation is selective. Cybercrime is tolerated as long as it targets foreigners. This isn't conspiracy. It's openly acknowledged in security assessments. Some states don't directly control these groups, but they benefit from the chaos, or at least don't feel compelled to stop it. The result? A global asymmetry. Victims are regulated. Criminals are mobile. Infrastructure is transnational. Accountability is fragmented. Ask yourself, where exactly did the crime occur? Victim in the US, server in Europe, operator in Asia, payment routed through crypto, and mule in Africa. Jurisdiction becomes a maze. And criminals exploit that maze perfectly. The conversation usually focuses on financial losses. But that misses something crucial. Millions of victims experience shame, anxiety, depression, financial ruin, and relationship breakdowns. And then there's the other side, the perpetrators who are also victims. UN-linked research estimates 200,000 to 500,000 people may be trafficked into forced cybercrime operations in Southeast Asia alone. Beaten if they refuse. Punished if they fail quotas. Trapped by debt and threats. This isn't just fraud. It's industrial exploitation. There's no silver bullet, but there are levers that matter far more than flashy arrests. Data minimization laws with teeth. If companies were legally required to justify data retention, and punished heavily for unnecessary exposure, breaches would become less valuable overnight. Payment rail accountability. Target the infrastructure that moves money, not just the people clicking links. Cross-border regulatory alignment. Cybercrime thrives in gaps. Closing gaps matters more than chasing individuals. Victim-centered reporting without punishment. If disclosure guarantees lawsuits and penalties, silence will always win. Treat cybercrime as an economic system. Because that's what it is. Not a glitch. Not a hacker problem. A market failure. Cybercrime didn't grow because technology failed. It grew because our institutions scaled slower than incentives. We optimized for convenience, growth, and data extraction, then acted surprised when criminals optimized too. And until we stop pretending this is about bad actors instead of bad structures, cybercrime won't just continue. It will professionalize further, automate faster, and integrate deeper into the global economy. Not because it's unstoppable, but because, right now, it makes too much sense.